The arrow missed Elias Anders' head by less than an inch, and before he could even process the sound of it embedding itself in the tree behind him, something slammed into his chest with the force of a battering ram and drove him flat onto his back in the mud. His sword flew from his grip, his breath exploded from his lungs, and when his vision cleared, he found himself staring up into a face that froze the blood in his veins. Green skin, pointed ears, small white tusks jutting from a full lower lip. Eyes the color of amber, wide with surprise that mirrored his own shock. The orc woman had one knee planted on either side of his hips, her hands pressed to his shoulders, pinning him completely. She was breathing hard, her dark hair falling in a wild braid over one shoulder, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she whispered, her voice rough and low, "Tell me I can kiss you." Elias blinked. Of all the things he had expected an orc to say while pinning him to the ground, that had not been anywhere on the list. His mind scrambled to catch up with what had just happened. He had been walking through the forest on his way back to his farm after selling grain in the border village. He had heard something in the trees. He had drawn his sword, then the arrow, then her. "What?" he managed, the word coming out strangled. The orc woman's eyes flickered with something that might have been embarrassment. Her grip on his shoulders loosened slightly. "I saved your life," she said, her accent thick but her words clear. "In my clan, when you save a life, you may claim a kiss. It is tradition. But you are human, and I do not know your ways, so I ask first." Elias stared at her. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might crack a rib. She had saved his life. That arrow had been aimed to kill, and she had tackled him out of its path. He became aware suddenly of how warm she was, how her weight pressed against him, how her amber eyes held his with an intensity that made something low in his belly tighten. "Who shot at me?" he asked instead of answering. "Hunters," she said. "Human hunters. They are gone now. I scared them away before they could reload." Her gaze dropped to his mouth, then quickly back to his eyes. "You have not answered." Elias swallowed. This was insane. Orcs were the enemy. Everyone knew that. The war had ended only 5 years ago, and the peace was fragile at best. Orcs lived in the mountains and the deep forests, and humans lived in the valleys and the plains, and they did not mix. His father had died fighting orcs. His brother had lost an arm to an orc blade, and yet this woman had just saved his life. And now she was asking permission to kiss him with a vulnerability in her eyes that made her seem far less like a monster and far more like a person. "Yes," he heard himself say. "You can kiss me." The orc woman's eyes widened. For a heartbeat she did not move, as if she had not expected him to agree. Then she leaned down slowly, giving him every chance to change his mind, and pressed her lips to his. It was gentle, careful. Her tusks pressed lightly against his skin, warm and smooth, and her mouth was soft. The kiss lasted only a moment before she pulled back, her cheeks darkening to a deeper green. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she pushed herself up and off him in one fluid motion, extending a hand to help him up. Elias took it, still dazed, and she hauled him to his feet with easy strength. She was tall, he realized, taller than him by a good 3 inches, and built like someone who had spent her whole life working hard and fighting harder. She wore leather armor that had seen better days, and a bow was slung across her back. "You should go," she said, not meeting his eyes. "The hunters may come back with more men. They were looking for orcs to kill. They will not be pleased that I interfered." "Wait," Elias said. His mind was starting to work again, putting pieces together. "You are alone out here?" She shrugged. "I'm always alone." "Why?" For a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she turned her amber gaze on him, and he saw the loneliness there, stark and deep. "Because I helped a human once before," she said. "My clan cast me out for it. They said I was a traitor to my people, so now I have no people." She picked up his sword from where it had fallen and held it out to him hilt first. "Go home, human. Forget this happened." Elias took the sword automatically, but he did not move. His farm was an hour's walk from here, tucked into a valley where a creek ran year-round and the soil was good. He had built it himself after the war, wanting nothing more than to be left alone to grow his crops and raise his chickens and forget the things he had seen and done. He had no family left, no close friends. He kept to himself, and that was how he liked it. But looking at this orc woman, this stranger who had saved his life and asked permission for a kiss and then told him to forget her, he found he could not just walk away. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Grasha." "I am Elias." He slid his sword back into its sheath. "Those hunters, they will come back like you said. And if they find you out here alone, they will kill you. I can take care of myself. I'm sure you can, but you do not have to." The words were coming out before he had fully thought them through, but once he started, he could not stop. "My farm is not far from here. I have a barn. You could stay there until the hunters give up and move on. A few days, maybe a week." Grasha stared at him as if he had just suggested she sprout wings and fly. "You would shelter an orc, after what my people did to yours?" "You just saved my life," Elias pointed out. "After what my people did to yours. Seems like maybe we are even." She shook her head slowly. "You do not know what you are offering. If anyone finds out, they will burn your farm and hang you for a traitor." "Then we will make sure no one finds out." Elias met her eyes steadily. He was not sure why he was doing this. Maybe it was because she had saved him. Maybe it was because he knew what it felt like to be alone. Or maybe it was because of that kiss, brief and gentle, and the way she had asked first. "Come with me, Grasha, just until it is safe." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "1 week," she said. "Then I go." 1 week, Elias agreed, and tried to ignore the part of him that already knew a week would not be enough. They walked in silence through the forest, Grasha moving like a shadow beside him. She kept to the trees, never stepping fully into the open, and her eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings. Elias found himself hyper-aware of her presence, of the quiet way she moved, of the set of her shoulders that spoke of readiness for violence at any moment. When they reached the edge of the forest and his farm came into view, she stopped. "This is yours?" she asked, and there was something like wonder in her voice. Elias looked at his land, trying to see it through her eyes, the small farmhouse he had built with his own hands, the neat rows of crops, the chicken coop, the barn that leaned slightly to the left but was sturdy enough. It was not much, but it was his. "Yes," he said. "Not very impressive, I know." "It is beautiful," Grasha said softly. "You built this alone?" "After the war ended, I wanted somewhere quiet." He glanced at her. "Come on. We need to get you inside before someone sees." The barn was dim and smelled of hay and the 2 goats that lived in the far stall. Elias led Grasha to the loft where he stored extra feed and tools. There was a window that let in light and air, and the space was dry and relatively comfortable. "You can stay up here," he said. "I will bring you food and water. There's a blanket in that chest. It gets cold at night." Grasha looked around the loft, then back at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Truly." Elias considered the question. He could give her a simple answer, something about repaying a debt or doing the right thing. But standing there in the quiet of his barn with this woman who had saved his life and asked to kiss him, he found he wanted to be honest. "I spent 3 years fighting in the war," he said. "I killed orcs, a lot of them, and they killed humans, a lot of them. And I came home and tried to make sense of it, tried to figure out what it had all been for, and I could not. All I knew was that I was tired of fighting, tired of hating. And then today you saved me, and you asked instead of taking, and I thought maybe there could be a different way." He met her eyes. "Maybe that is foolish, but it is the truth." Grasha's expression softened. "It is not foolish," she said quietly. "It is brave." Elias felt his face heat. He was not used to being called brave, not anymore. "I will bring you dinner," he said, and climbed down from the loft before she could say anything else. He spent the rest of the afternoon working his fields and trying not to think about the orc woman in his barn. It should have been easy to focus on the familiar routine of weeding and watering, of checking the plants for pests and disease, but his mind kept drifting back to amber eyes and green skin and the feel of her lips against his. He had been kissed before, of course. There had been a girl in his village before the war and a few casual encounters since, but none of them had felt like that. None of them had made his heart race quite so fast. When the sun began to set, he went inside and made a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried meat. He filled a water skin from his well and carried everything out to the barn. Grasha was sitting in the loft window, silhouetted against the fading light, and she turned when she heard him climb the ladder. "I was beginning to think you had changed your mind," she said. "I was working." Elias set the food and water down. "I have crops to tend. They do not care that I have a guest." Grasha slid down from the window and approached the meal cautiously, as if she expected it to be a trick. When she picked up the bread and took a bite, her eyes closed in what looked like bliss. "This is good," she said, "very good. It is just bread. I have not had bread in a long time." She ate hungrily, and Elias found himself watching her, noting the way her tusks caught the light when she chewed, the way her pointed ears twitched at every sound. When she finished, she looked up at him. "Thank you, Elias." "You are welcome," he hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "You may ask." "Why did you help that human, the one that got you cast out from your clan?" Grasha was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was distant, as if she was looking back at a memory she had tried to forget. "It was a child," she said. "A human child, maybe 6 or 7 years old. She had wandered into the mountains and gotten lost. My clan found her, and they wanted to kill her. They said she would grow up to be a soldier, that it was better to end the threat early. But I looked at her, and all I saw was a scared little girl. So I took her and brought her back to the nearest human village. I left her on the edge and made sure she was safe before I returned." She looked down at her hands. "My clan said I had betrayed them, that I had chosen humans over my own people. They gave me 1 hour to leave and never come back." Elias felt something twist in his chest. "How long ago was that?" 2 years. "And you have been alone since then?" "Yes." He could not imagine it. 2 years with no one to talk to, no one to rely on. 2 years of hiding and running and never being safe. "I'm sorry," he said. Grasha shrugged. "It was my choice. I would make it again." "Still, no one should be alone like that." She looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her eyes. "You are alone too," she said. "I can tell. I suppose I am." Elias sat down on the edge of a hay bale. "My family is dead. The war took them. And after I came back, I found I did not fit in the village anymore. Everyone wanted to talk about the war, to celebrate the victory, and all I could think about was the people I had killed. So I came here." "Do you regret it?" Grasha asked. "The killing?" "Every day." The admission came easier than he expected. "I tell myself I was following orders, that it was us or them, but it does not make the nightmares stop." Grasha moved closer, settling onto the hay bale beside him. The space between them was small enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "I understand," she said. "I killed humans in the war too, before I realized how wrong it all was. The faces stay with you." "Yes." Elias looked at her, this orc woman who understood him in a way no one else had. "The faces stay with you." They sat together in the growing darkness, not speaking, just being. And for the first time in a long time, Elias did not feel quite so alone. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Elias would work his farm during the day, and in the evenings he would bring food to Grasha in the barn. They would eat together and talk, sharing stories about their lives before the war, their dreams, their fears. Elias learned that Grasha loved the stars, that she could name every constellation and knew the stories behind them. Grasha learned that Elias had wanted to be a carpenter before the war, that he still carved small wooden figures in the evenings when he could not sleep. On the 3rd day, Elias brought his carving tools and a piece of wood to the barn. Grasha watched with fascination as his hands shaped the wood into the form of a bird. "How do you do that?" she asked. "Practice. Do you want to try?" He handed her a knife and a piece of wood, and she took them gingerly. Her hands, he noticed, were scarred and calloused, but she held the knife with surprising delicacy. He showed her how to make the first cut, how to follow the grain of the wood, and she listened intently. Her first attempts were clumsy, but she learned fast. By the time the sun set, she had carved a rough approximation of a leaf. "It is not very good," she said, holding it up critically. "It is your first try. That is better than my first try was." Elias smiled. "Keep it. Maybe you can make it better tomorrow." Grasha tucked the wooden leaf into her pocket, and the smile she gave him made his heart skip. On the 5th day, Elias woke to the sound of his chickens screaming. He bolted out of bed, grabbed his sword, and ran outside in his nightshirt to find Grasha in the chicken coop, holding a dead fox by the scruff of its neck. The chickens were huddled in the corner, ruffled but unharmed. "I heard them making noise," Grasha explained. "I thought I should check." Elias lowered his sword, his heart still racing. "You saved my chickens. I could not let them be eaten. You have been kind to me. This is the least I can do." She held up the fox. "Do you want the pelt?" "I would not know what to do with it." "I can skin it for you. Fox pelts sell well in villages." She did, right there in the yard as the sun rose, her hands quick and efficient. Elias watched, impressed despite himself. When she was done, she stretched the pelt on a frame and set it to dry, then cleaned her hands in the water trough. "Thank you," Elias said, "for this, for all of it." Grasha looked at him, and there was something soft in her expression. "You gave me a place to be safe," she said. "You gave me kindness when you did not have to. This is nothing." But it was not nothing. It was everything. And Elias was starting to realize that the idea of her leaving at the end of the week was becoming unbearable. On the 6th day, the hunters came. Elias was in the field when he saw them, 3 men on horseback riding up the path to his farm. He recognized one of them from the village, a man named Garrett who had served in the war and now made his living hunting game. Elias set down his hoe and walked to meet them, his heart pounding. "Elias Anders," Garrett called out. "Good to see you." "Garrett, what brings you out here?" "We are tracking an orc, big female, traveling alone. We lost her trail a few days ago near your land. You have not seen anything, have you?" Elias kept his expression neutral. "An orc?" "No, I have not seen any orcs." Garrett studied him. "You are sure?" "She is dangerous. Killed 2 of my men in the mountains last month." Elias doubted that was true, but he did not argue. "I have not seen her. If I do, I will send word to the village." "We would appreciate that." Garrett glanced toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure?" Every muscle in Elias's body tensed. "I do mind, actually. This is my land." "Now, Elias, we are just trying to keep people safe." "I understand. And I'm telling you there is no orc here. Now I need to get back to my work." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You are acting strange. Anders, you have something to hide?" "I have a farm to run, and not a lot of patience for people who do not trust my word." Elias crossed his arms. "You can either take me at my word and leave, or you can try to force your way onto my land and see what happens." For a tense moment, he thought Garrett would push it, but then the man shrugged. "Fine, but if that orc shows up and causes trouble, it is on your head." "Noted." The hunters turned and rode away, and Elias stood watching until they were out of sight. Then he sprinted to the barn. "Grasha!" he called up to the loft. "Are you all right?" She appeared at the edge, her face pale. "I heard them. Thank you for not giving me away." "Of course not." Elias climbed the ladder. "But they are looking for you, and they are going to keep looking. It is not safe for you to be out in the open anymore." "It was never safe." Grasha sank down, wrapping her arms around her knees. "I should leave. I'm putting you in danger." "No." The word came out sharper than he intended. Elias sat down beside her. "You are not leaving. Not yet." "Elias, you heard him. He thinks I'm a murderer." "He is a liar. You did not kill anyone." "How do you know that?" "Because I know you." Elias met her eyes. "In the time you have been here, you have saved my life, protected my chickens, and carved a dozen little wooden leaves. You are not a murderer, Grasha, and I am not going to let them hurt you." Grasha stared at him, her amber eyes bright with emotion. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "I'm just an orc." "You're not just anything." Elias reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. Her skin was warm and rough with calluses. "You're brave and kind, and you make me laugh. You're the first person in years who has made me feel like maybe I am not broken, and if you think I am going to let you walk away after only 6 days, you are out of your mind." Grasha's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around his. "I feel the same way," she said, "about you. I've been alone for so long, and then you offered me shelter and asked me about the stars, and I started to hope that maybe I could have something more than just survival. But I'm afraid, Elias, afraid that this cannot last, afraid that they will find me and hurt you because of me. Then we will figure it out together. Elias squeezed her hand. But you are not leaving. Not unless you want to. I do not want to, Grasha admitted. I want to stay. With you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Elias could feel his pulse in his throat, could see the way Grasha's chest rose and fell with her breathing. He thought about that kiss, the one she had asked permission for, and before he could stop himself, he leaned in. Tell me I can kiss you, he whispered, echoing her words from that first day. Grasha's eyes widened. Then she smiled, slow and beautiful, and cupped his face in her hands. Yes, she breathed. Yes, you can. This kiss was different from the first. It was deeper, more urgent, full of all the things they had been holding back. Elias felt her tusks press against his skin, felt her fingers tangle in his hair, and it was perfect. It was right. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Stay, Elias said again, not just for a week. Stay. Yes, Grasha said, I will stay. They held each other in the loft as the sun set, and for the first time since the war ended, Elias felt like he had found something worth fighting for. The next morning, Elias woke with a plan. If Grasha was going to stay, they needed to make sure she could do so safely. That meant keeping her hidden from the village, at least for now. But it also meant making sure she had a life here, not just an existence in the barn loft. He spent the morning reinforcing the barn, adding a bar to the door that could be secured from the inside, and covering the loft window with a curtain that could be drawn to hide the light. Grasha helped, her strength making quick work of the heavier tasks. They worked side by side, and Elias found himself constantly aware of her presence, of the way she moved, of the sound of her voice when she spoke. This is good work, Grasha said, testing the bar on the door. But I cannot stay in the barn forever. Eventually someone will notice. I know, Elias wiped sweat from his forehead. We will figure something out. Maybe in a few months, once the hunters have moved on, we can say you are a traveler who needed work. People do not look too closely at farmhands if they keep to themselves. And if they do look closely, if they see what I am, then we will deal with it. Elias met her eyes. Together. Grasha nodded, but he could see the worry in her expression. He wanted to reassure her, to promise that everything would be all right, but he knew better than to make promises he might not be able to keep. So instead, he took her hand and squeezed it, and hoped that would be enough. That afternoon, as Elias was mending a fence, he heard the sound of hooves on the road. He looked up to see a single rider approaching, and his stomach sank when he recognized the uniform. A royal messenger. This could not be good. The messenger dismounted and handed Elias a sealed letter. From the magistrate in the capital, he said, all landowners are required to read and respond within 10 days. Elias took the letter, his hands suddenly cold. What is this about? New census. The Crown wants account of all people living on registered lands. You will need to list everyone in your household, including servants and laborers. The messenger tipped his hat. Good day. He rode away, leaving Elias standing there with the letter in his hands. He read it twice, then a third time, but the words did not change. A census. They wanted names, descriptions, and proof of citizenship for everyone living on his land. And if he failed to comply, he could lose his farm. He went to the barn and climbed up to the loft where Grasha was stitching a tear in her leather armor. We have a problem, he said, and handed her the letter. Grasha read it slowly, her expression darkening. When she finished, she looked up at him. This is because of me, is it not? They are looking for orcs who might be hiding among humans. Probably. Elias sat down heavily. If I do not report you, I could lose the farm. But if I do report you, they will arrest you or worse. Then there is only one solution. Grasha set the letter aside. I leave. Tonight. You can tell them you live alone, and this will all go away. No. The word came out harsh and final. That is not a solution. That is just running away. Sometimes running away is the only option. Not for us. Elias stood, pacing the small space of the loft. There has to be another way, something we are not seeing. Elias, be reasonable. You cannot risk your home for me. Yes, I can. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Do you think this farm matters more to me than you do? It is just land, just wood and dirt, but you are real. You are important, and I am not going to lose you because of some damned census." Grasha stood, crossing to him. She put her hands on his shoulders, and her amber eyes were fierce. "Then what do we do?" Elias thought hard. There had to be a loophole, some way around this, and then it hit him. "Marriage," he said. "What?" "If we were married, you would be family, not a servant or a laborer. The law is different for spouses. They cannot demand proof of citizenship for a spouse, only a record of the marriage." He grabbed her hands. "Grasha, marry me." She stared at him as if he had lost his mind. "Elias, we have known each other for less than a week. I know it is fast, but I also know that I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I know that you make me happy. I know that I want you to stay, not just for now but for always, and I know that this might be our only chance." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. I'm just asking you to trust me, to give us a chance." Grasha was silent for a long moment. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear warring with hope. Then she said quietly, "I do love you." Elias felt his heart stop. "What?" "I love you, Elias Anders. I think I started loving you the moment you offered me shelter when you had no reason to, and I've been falling deeper every day since." She cupped his face in her hands. "But I'm afraid. Afraid that this will not work. Afraid that they will take you from me." "Then be afraid with me," Elias said, "but do not leave me. Please." Grasha's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled him into a fierce embrace. "Yes," she whispered against his neck. "Yes, I will marry you." Elias held her tight, relief flooding through him. "We will make this work," he promised. "I do not know how, but we will." They spent the rest of the day planning. Marriage between a human and an orc was not explicitly illegal, but it was so rare as to be almost unheard of. They would need a witness, someone they could trust to keep the secret. They would need a ring or some token to make it official. And they would need to register the marriage with the magistrate before the census was completed. The next morning, Elias rode to the village. He went to the blacksmith, a gruff older man named Thomas who had lost his son in the war and now kept mostly to himself. "I need a ring," Elias said. "2 rings, actually. Simple ones." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Getting married, are you?" "Yes." "To who?" "I did not know you were courting anyone." "It is complicated." Elias met the blacksmith's eyes. "And private. Can you make the rings or not?" Thomas studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "Your business is your own. I will have them ready in 2 days." "Thank you." Next, Elias went to the village clerk, a nervous young man named Peter who handled all the local paperwork. "I need to register a marriage," Elias said. Peter pulled out a ledger. "Names of the parties?" "Elias Anders and Grasha." He hesitated. Orcs did not have last names the way humans did, but he could not put that in the official record. "Grasha Anders. She is taking my name." "And she is here to sign?" "She is ill. I will bring her signature later." Peter frowned. "That's irregular. The law requires both parties to be present. The law also says that in cases of illness or injury, a proxy signature is acceptable if witnessed by 2 citizens in good standing." Elias had spent half the night reading the legal texts he kept from his father's time as a village elder. "I can bring 2 witnesses to attest to her signature." "Well, yes, technically that is true." Peter looked uncomfortable. "But I will need to see proof of her citizenship. She is from the Northern Territories. Her records were lost in the war." That was the story they had agreed on. It was vague enough to be plausible, and common enough that it would not raise too many questions. "She is a refugee," Peter sighed. "This is going to be a lot of paperwork. I will pay the extra fees." "Fine, but I need that witness signature within the week, or the registration will be void." Elias left the clerk's office feeling slightly ill. They had cleared the first hurdle, but there were so many more to go. He needed witnesses he could trust, and there were not many people in his life who fit that description. When he returned to the farm, he found Grasha in the garden, pulling weeds. She had tied her hair back and rolled up her sleeves, and there was dirt on her hands and a look of contentment on her face. Elias stood for a moment, just watching her, marveling at how right she looked there, how much she already seemed to belong. "Any luck?" she asked when she noticed him. Some. The rings will be ready in 2 days. I registered the marriage, but we need to get your signature witnessed. He sat down on the edge of the garden bed. That's the hard part. We need 2 people we can trust not to turn you in. Grasha wiped her hands on her pants. Do you have anyone like that? Maybe. There's a woman who lives on the farm to the east. Her name is Clara. She lost her husband and daughter to an orc raid during the war, but she's always been kind to me. I'm not sure if she would help, but she is the closest thing I have to a friend around here. If she lost her family to orcs, she will not help me. We have to try. Elias reached out and took her hand. We do not have a lot of options. Grasha nodded reluctantly. Then we try. The next day, Elias walked to Clara's farm. She was in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a weathered face. She greeted him with a warm smile. Elias, what a pleasant surprise. What brings you by? I need to talk to you about something important. Clara's smile faded. That sounds serious. Come inside. They sat at her kitchen table, and Elias took a deep breath. This was a risk, but it was one he had to take. I'm getting married, he said. Clara's eyes widened. Married? To who? Her name is Grasha. She's from the north. She came here a few weeks ago looking for work, and we fell in love. The lies came easier than he expected, smoothed by the truth underneath them. But there is a problem. She is an orc. Clara went very still. For a long moment she did not speak, and Elias could see the emotions warring on her face, shock, anger, pain. Then, quietly, she said, You're in love with an orc. Yes, after everything they did to us. I know what they did. I fought in the war, same as you lost family in it. But Grasha is not the war. She is just a person trying to survive, and she is kind and brave, and she makes me happy. Elias leaned forward. I know this is a lot to ask. I know you have every reason to hate orcs, but I need help, Clara. I need witnesses to make the marriage legal, and I do not have anyone else I can trust. Clara stood and walked to the window, looking out at her fields. They killed my William, she said softly, and my little Rosie. She was only 8 years old. I know, and I am sorry. I am so sorry. But you are asking me to help an orc. I am asking you to help me, and her. Elias stood as well. I understand if you cannot do it, but I had to ask. Clara was silent for a long time. Then she turned back to him. I want to meet her, she said. This Grasha. If I'm going to do this, I need to look her in the eye first. Elias felt hope flare in his chest. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have not agreed to anything yet. Bring her here tomorrow. We will talk. That evening, Elias told Grasha about the conversation. She listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She lost her daughter to orcs, Grasha said when he finished. She will hate me. Maybe, or maybe she will surprise us. Elias took her hand. Either way, we have to try. The next day, they walked together to Clara's farm. Grasha wore a cloak with a deep hood, and she kept her face down until they were inside. When Clara saw her, really saw her with her green skin and tusks and pointed ears, the older woman flinched, but she did not turn away. You are Grasha, Clara said. Yes. Grasha pulled back her hood fully. I am sorry for your loss, for what my people did to your family. Are you? Clara's voice was sharp. Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? I mean it. Grasha met her eyes steadily. I lost people too in the war, my brother, my mother, and when it ended, I thought maybe the killing would stop. But it has not. Humans still hunt orcs, orcs still hate humans, and people like me, people who do not want to fight anymore, we have nowhere to go. Her voice cracked. I am tired of the war, Clara. I just want to live in peace, and I love Elias more than I thought I could love anyone. So I'm asking you, not as an orc, but as a person, please help us. Clara stared at her for a long moment. Then she looked at Elias. You really love her? With everything I have. And you, Grasha? You love him? More than my own life. Clara sighed and rubbed her face. I must be losing my mind, she muttered. Then, louder. All right, I will witness your signature, but on one condition. Anything, Elias said. You invite me to the wedding. A real wedding, not just paperwork. I want to see you two make your vows properly." Grasha's eyes widened. "You would come to our wedding?" "If I am going to help you, I'm going to do it right." Clara smiled slightly. "Besides, someone needs to make sure Elias does not mess this up." Elias felt tears prick his eyes. "Thank you, Clara. You do not know what this means to us." "I think I do." Clara reached out and took Grasha's hand, the gesture tentative but sincere. "My Rosie used to say that the world needed more kindness. I think she would have liked you, Grasha." Grasha's face crumpled, and she pulled Clara into a hug. The older woman stiffened for a moment, then hugged back, and Elias had to look away to hide the emotions on his own face. They still needed one more witness. Clara suggested her neighbor, an old farmer named Bernard, who owed her a favor and did not ask too many questions. He agreed without prying into the details, and 2 days later they all gathered in Elias's farmhouse to make it official. Elias had picked up the rings from Thomas, simple bands of iron that gleamed in the afternoon light. He and Grasha stood facing each other in the small main room of the house, with Clara and Bernard watching. There was no priest, no official ceremony, just the two of them and their words. "I did not prepare a speech," Elias admitted, "but I want to say this. Grasha, you came into my life when I thought I had nothing left to hope for. You showed me that there could be something more than just surviving. You made me believe in kindness again and in love, and in the possibility of a future that does not have to be defined by the past. I promise to protect you, to stand by you, and to build a life with you that is worth all the risks we are taking." He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands shaking slightly. Grasha looked down at the ring, then back up at him, her amber eyes bright with tears. "Elias, I have been alone for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be wanted, to be valued, to be loved. You gave me all of that, and you asked for nothing in return except that I stay. You risked everything for me, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. I promise to be your partner, your friend, and your love, for as long as we both live." She slid the ring onto his finger, and her hands were steady. "Then, by the power vested in absolutely no one, I now pronounce you married," Clara said, wiping her eyes. "Kiss her, you fool." Elias laughed, and then he kissed Grasha, and it felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, Clara and Bernard were clapping, and the small farmhouse felt full of warmth and hope. They spent the evening celebrating with a simple meal that Clara had prepared. Bernard told stories about his days as a soldier, and Clara shared memories of her late husband. Grasha talked about her life in the orc clans, about the traditions and the songs and the way they marked the seasons, and Elias found himself thinking that this, right here, was what peace should look like. Different people, different histories, coming together to share food and laughter and joy. When Clara and Bernard finally left, promising to return for a proper wedding ceremony once things were safer, Elias and Grasha were alone in the house. Grasha looked around the small space, taking in the rough wooden furniture, the fireplace, the single bed in the corner. "This is my home now," she said, wonder in her voice. "Our home," Elias corrected. He took her hand and led her to the bed. They lay down together, still fully clothed, and Grasha curled into his side with her head on his chest. Elias wrapped his arms around her, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her body against his. "Are you scared?" Grasha asked quietly. "Terrified," Elias admitted, "but also happier than I've been in years." "Me too." They fell asleep like that, holding each other, and for one night at least, the world and all its dangers felt very far away. The next week was a blur of activity. Elias and Grasha took the signed and witnessed marriage certificate to the village clerk, who processed it with a minimum of fuss. The census was completed, and Elias listed Grasha as his wife, a refugee from the Northern Territories. No one questioned it, or if they did, they kept their suspicions to themselves. Grasha moved from the barn into the house, and they began the process of learning to live together. It was not always easy. She was used to sleeping lightly, waking at the slightest sound, and she had nightmares that left her shaking and disoriented. Elias learned to wake her gently, to hold her until the fear passed. He had his own nightmares, his own moments of panic, and she was patient with him in turn. They worked the farm together, and Elias was constantly amazed by her strength and endurance. She could haul twice as much water as he could could plow a field in half the time and never seemed to tire. But she was also gentle with the animals, crooning to the goats in her own language, collecting eggs from the chickens with a care that made his heart ache. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Grasha pulled out the wooden leaf she had carved on her third day at the farm. She had been working on it in her spare moments, refining the shape, adding details. Now it was smooth and perfect, every vein visible, every edge precise. "For you," she said, handing it to him. Elias turned it over in his hands, marveling at the craftsmanship. "This is beautiful. You taught me how to make it. I wanted you to have the first thing I carved." He leaned over and kissed her, soft and slow. "Thank you. I will keep it forever." A month after the wedding, Clara came by with news. "I heard in the village that the hunters have moved on," she said. "They gave up looking for the orc. Word is they think she left the territory." Elias felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "That is good news." "It is. But you should still be careful. People talk, and if anyone sees Grasha, they will have questions." "We will be careful," Grasha promised. She was helping Clara plant seeds in the vegetable garden, and the two women had formed an unlikely but genuine friendship. "Thank you for telling us." Clara reached over and patted Grasha's hand. "You are family now. We look out for family." As spring turned to summer, life on the farm settled into a comfortable rhythm. Grasha became braver about venturing outside during the day, though she always kept a hood or hat nearby in case someone approached. Elias taught her to read and write in the human script, and she taught him the orc language, which was guttural and harsh but also strangely beautiful. They shared their histories, their cultures, the things that made them who they were. One warm evening in early summer, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Grasha said, "I want to have a proper wedding, like Clara suggested." Elias looked at her in surprise. "We are already married." "I know, but that was for the law. I want something for us, something that celebrates what we have, not just what we need to survive." She took his hand. "I want to make vows to you in front of the people who matter. I want to wear something beautiful and dance with you and remember this day for the rest of my life." Elias felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Then we will have a wedding. The best wedding we can manage." They spent the next few weeks planning. Clara helped Grasha make a dress from fabric they bought in the village, a simple design in deep green that brought out the color of her skin. Bernard agreed to play his fiddle for music. They decided to hold the ceremony at sunset on the longest day of summer in the field behind Elias's farmhouse where wildflowers grew in abundance. The day of the wedding dawned clear and warm. Elias spent the morning cleaning the house and setting up a small table in the field with food and drink. Grasha stayed with Clara getting ready, and Elias was not allowed to see her until the ceremony. When the sun began its descent, Bernard started playing, a lilting melody that drifted across the field. Clara appeared first, walking slowly up the makeshift aisle they had created with stones and flowers. Then Grasha stepped into view, and Elias forgot how to breathe. She wore the green dress which fit her perfectly, accentuating her strong shoulders and the curve of her waist. Her dark hair was unbraided for once, falling in waves around her face, and she had woven wildflowers into it. Her tusks gleamed in the golden light, and her amber eyes were locked on his. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Grasha walked to him, her steps slow and deliberate, and when she reached him, she took both of his hands in hers. "I did not think I would ever have this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I would spend my life alone, hiding, always running. But you gave me a home. You gave me hope. You gave me love. And now I want to give you all of me, not just for survival, but because I choose you. Because there is no one else in this world I would rather build a life with." Elias could barely see through his tears. "I spent so long trying to forget the war, trying to outrun the pain, that I forgot how to live. But you reminded me. You showed me that life is not just about surviving, but about finding joy and connection and meaning. You are my joy, Grasha. You are my meaning. And I choose you every day for the rest of my life." They exchanged the iron rings again, saying the words that made it real. Then Elias pulled Grasha into his arms and kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and orange. Bernard played, Clara cried, and in that moment everything was perfect. They danced in the field as the stars came out, Grasha teaching Elias the steps to an orc dance, and Elias teaching her a human waltz. They ate and drank and laughed, and when the night grew late and Clara and Bernard finally left, Elias and Grasha walked back to the house hand in hand. That night they made love for the first time, slow and tender and full of all the emotions they had been holding back. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, Grasha tracing patterns on Elias's chest. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered. "Neither did I." Elias kissed the top of her head. "But we are, and we will be." As the months passed, their life together deepened. Grasha's presence on the farm became known in the village, though they maintained the story that she was a refugee from the north. A few people were suspicious, but most were too busy with their own lives to care. Clara's endorsement helped, and gradually Grasha became, if not fully accepted, at least tolerated. In the autumn, Grasha announced that she was pregnant. Elias received the news with a mixture of joy and terror. A child. Their child. It seemed impossible, and yet it was happening. "Are you all right?" Grasha asked, watching his face. "I am more than all right. I'm amazed." Elias pulled her into a hug. "We are going to be parents." "We are." Grasha's voice was soft. "I'm scared, Elias. What if the child is born looking more orc than human? What if people realize? Then we will protect them, the same way we protect each other." Elias cupped her face in his hands. "We will figure it out. We always do." The pregnancy was not easy. Grasha was sick often in the beginning, and as the baby grew, she found it harder to move and work. Elias took on more of the farm chores, and Clara came by regularly to help. They prepared the house, building a small cradle and gathering supplies. And through it all, Elias marveled at the way Grasha bloomed, her face taking on a soft glow, her hands resting protectively on her belly. The baby was born on a cold winter night, with Clara acting as midwife. It was a long labor, and Elias held Grasha's hand through all of it, whispering encouragement, wiping her brow. When the baby finally came, screaming and red-faced, Clara wrapped it in a blanket and placed it in Grasha's arms. "A boy," she announced, "and he is beautiful." Elias looked at his son and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. The baby had Grasha's green skin, though it was lighter, almost olive. His ears were slightly pointed, but not as much as an orc's. And when he opened his eyes, they were a striking blend of amber and brown. "He looks like both of us," Grasha said, tears streaming down her face. "He is perfect." Elias touched the baby's tiny hand, and the baby's fingers wrapped around his. "What should we name him?" They decided on Ethan, after Elias's father, with a middle name in the orc tradition that meant new beginning. Ethan Anders, the first of his kind, born of two worlds. Raising Ethan was both a challenge and a joy. He grew quickly, as orc children did, and he was strong and curious. But he also had a gentleness to him, a kindness that reminded Elias of Grasha. They kept him close to the farm for the first few years, not wanting to expose him to the prejudice of the village until he was old enough to understand. But as Ethan grew, it became clear that they could not hide forever. When he was 5 years old, he asked why he did not have friends like the children in the village Clara talked about. "Because we are different," Grasha explained gently. "And sometimes people are afraid of things that are different." "But why?" Ethan asked, his young face scrunched in confusion. "That is a good question," Elias said, "and I do not have a good answer. But I promise you, Ethan, that we will do everything we can to make sure you grow up in a world that is kinder than the one we were born into." They started slowly. Clara brought her nephew to the farm, a boy close to Ethan's age, and the two children played together under careful supervision. The nephew, a sweet kid named Oliver, did not care that Ethan's skin was green or that his ears were pointed. He only cared that Ethan was good at climbing trees and told funny stories. Encouraged, Elias and Grasha began taking Ethan to the village on market days. There were stares, of course, and whispers, but there were also people like Clara who smiled at Ethan and offered him apples, who treated him like any other child. It was not perfect, but it was a start. One day when Ethan was 7, he came home from the village in tears. Elias found him in the barn, hiding in the loft where Grasha had once stayed. "What happened?" Elias asked, climbing up to sit beside his son. Some boys called me a monster, Ethan said, his voice breaking. They said I did not belong here, that I should go back to the mountains with the other orcs. Elias felt anger surge through him, hot and fierce. But he pushed it down, knowing that what Ethan needed was not anger, but comfort. Those boys are wrong, he said firmly. You are not a monster. You are my son, and you are brave and kind and smart. And anyone who cannot see, that is the one who does not belong. But I am different, Ethan said. I do not look like you or the other children. No, you do not. You look like your mother, who is the strongest, bravest person I know. And you look like yourself, which is perfect. Elias put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. Being different is not bad, Ethan. It is what makes you special. Do you really believe that? I do. And someday the rest of the world will too. Ethan leaned into him, and Elias held his son, wishing he could protect him from all the pain the world would throw at him, knowing that he could not. That night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Grasha sat by the fire with Elias, her expression troubled. This is only going to get harder as he gets older, she said. The prejudice, the hatred. I do not know if I can stand to watch him suffer because of what I am. He is not suffering because of what you are. He is suffering because people are ignorant and cruel. Elias took her hand. But he is also strong, because he has you as a mother, and he will survive this, the same way we survived. I hope you are right. I am. Elias kissed her forehead. And we will be there for him, every step of the way. As the years passed, Ethan grew into a remarkable young man. He was tall and strong like his mother, with his father's steady temperament and his mother's fierce determination. He learned to navigate the prejudice he faced, standing up for himself when necessary, but also choosing his battles wisely. He made friends, slowly but surely, with the children who saw past his appearance to the person underneath. When Ethan was 12, Grasha gave birth to a daughter. They named her Alara, and she had her father's brown eyes and her mother's pointed ears. She was loud and fearless from the moment she was born, and she adored her older brother. The farm prospered. Elias expanded the fields, planted an orchard, and built a larger barn. Grasha became known in the region for her skill with animals, and people came from miles around to buy her goats and chickens. Clara remained a constant presence, a grandmother in all but name to Ethan and Alara. One spring day, when Ethan was 15, he came to Elias with a serious expression. Father, I want to join the merchant guild, he said. I want to travel, to see the world beyond the farm. Elias felt a pang of fear. The world was still not a safe place for someone like Ethan, but he also knew that he could not keep his son sheltered forever. Are you sure? He asked. I am. I have spent my whole life here, and I love the farm, but I want to know what else is out there. I want to meet other people like me, people who are caught between two worlds. Ethan met his father's eyes. And I want to show people that someone like me can be more than just a monster in their stories. Elias looked at his son, this brave young man who was so much more than he and Grasha could have ever hoped for, and he felt pride swell in his chest. Then you should go, he said. Your mother and I will support you, whatever you decide. Grasha was harder to convince, but eventually she agreed. They spent the summer preparing, teaching Ethan everything they could about navigating a world that might not welcome him. And when autumn came, Ethan set off with a caravan heading east, promising to write and to come home for the winter. The house felt empty without him, but Elias and Grasha had each other, and they had Alara, who filled the space with her laughter and energy. And they had the farm, the life they had built together against all odds. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Grasha leaned her head on Elias's shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Choosing me? Choosing this life? Elias turned to look at her, this woman who had changed everything, who had given him hope and love and a family. Her green skin was weathered now, her dark hair streaked with gray. But her amber eyes still held the same fire, the same strength that had captivated him that first day in the forest. Not for a single moment, he said. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Grasha. You and our children and this life we built. I would choose it all again in a heartbeat. Grasha smiled, and it was the smile she saved just for him, warm and full of love. I would too, she said. They sat together as the stars came out, holding hands, surrounded by the life they had fought so hard to create. It had not been easy. There had been fear and danger and pain, but there had also been joy and laughter and love. And in the end, that was what mattered. Years later, when Elias's hair had gone white and Grasha moved a little slower, Ethan returned home. He brought with him a wife, a human woman named Zara who had fallen in love with him despite, or perhaps because of, his mixed heritage. And he brought news. "I have been working with a group," he said over dinner, "humans and orcs trying to build bridges between our peoples. We want to create safe places where mixed families like ours can live without fear. And we want you to help us, Mother, Father. Your story, your life together, it is proof that peace is possible." Elias looked at Grasha, and he saw the tears in her eyes. "We would be honored," he said. And so, in their later years, Elias and Grasha became symbols of hope. They spoke at gatherings, shared their story, and helped other mixed couples navigate the challenges they faced. It was hard work, and progress was slow. But little by little, things began to change. Laws were passed protecting mixed marriages. Villages began to welcome orc refugees, and children like Ethan and Alara, caught between two worlds, found that they had a place in both. Elias lived to see his grandchildren born, beautiful babies with skin in shades of green and brown, with eyes that held the wisdom of two peoples. He lived to see the day when an orc family moved into the village without fear, when human and orc children played together in the streets. He lived to see the world he and Grasha had fought for begin to take shape. And when he was very old, lying in the bed he had shared with Grasha for over 40 years, he held her hand and looked into her amber eyes one last time. "We did it," he whispered. "We made a difference." "We did," Grasha said, her voice strong despite her tears. "And I would do it all again, every moment, just to have this life with you." Elias smiled. "Tell me I can kiss you," he said, echoing the words she had spoken so long ago. "Always," Grasha said, and she leaned down and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of a lifetime of love. Elias closed his eyes, surrounded by his family, at peace. He had lived a good life, a hard life, but a good one. And he had loved, truly and deeply, across every boundary the world had tried to place between them. In the end, that was all that mattered. Love had been enough. Grasha lived several more years after Elias passed, cared for by her children and grandchildren. She tended the farm, taught the young ones about their orc heritage, and told stories about the man who had offered her shelter when he had no reason to, who had asked her to stay, who had loved her with everything he had. When she finally joined Elias, she was buried beside him in the field where they had married, under the wildflowers that bloomed every spring. Their children planted a tree over the grave, a strong oak that grew tall and proud, its branches reaching toward the sky. And in the village, in the homes of the people who had known them, the story was told of the human farmer and the orc woman who had dared to love each other, of how she had pinned him to the ground and asked to kiss him, and how that single moment of vulnerability and courage had changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who came after them. It was a story of hope, of perseverance, of the power of choosing love over fear, again and again, even when the world said it was impossible. And it was a story that would be told for generations, a reminder that the most extraordinary things often begin with the simplest of choices. The choice to be kind, the choice to trust, the choice to love, and the choice to ask always before taking what should only be given freely.